Now, so just a minute. তোমাকে কি কোয়েশ্চেনটা বললাম একবার বলো? No longer it is. Hmm. Just a minute. So, with reference to any African literature, show how Chinua Achebe uh, animates literature with reference to Chinua Achebe. Here we start with the quote of the writer himself, Chinua Achebe. I believe it is important to write anything in Africa without some kind of commitment, some kind of message, some kind of protest, because there were people who thought we didn't have a past. What we were doing was to say we did. Here it is. So Chinua Achebe starts his answer in this manner. So African literature is politically committed, declared Leopold Sédar Senghor, SNGHOR, at the first International Conference of Negro Writers and Artists at the Sorbonne, SORBONNE, in 1956. Most of the African writers revolted against colonial rule, resentment, and racial discrimination. The ugly face of colonial rulers and their slave trade inspired African poets in the first place. We see slavery is still one of the main themes of Negro poetry. So, here in this paper, I would like to explore language, politics, and African writer with reference to Chinua Achebe. So, the African writer who has been very much influenced by the politics because the African intellectual is a part of the political elite. Chinua Achebe is a very suitable example. So, during the days, his writing spans the succession of political crises which has beset Nigeria. Chinua Achebe is probably the most widely read of contemporary African writers, both on the African continent and abroad. His reputation was quickly established with his first novel, Things Fall Apart, which won him the Margaret Brown Memorial Prize, as well as scholarship and grants. After the publication of his second novel, No Longer At Ease, the second novel, he is awarded the Nigerian National Trophy for Literature. And for his third novel, Arrow of the God, he received the New Statesman Jock Campbell Award. Over the decade, Achebe lectures and essays have provoked much debate in Africa itself and for assistant African writers, and his influence on younger novelists has been considerable. He has been nominated for the Nobel Prize for Literature. Chinua Achebe, born in Odigidi, in the eastern part of Nigeria in 1930. His father was an evangelist and church teacher. Evangelist means he was connected with the church, a church teacher. Although many of his relatives and neighbors adhered to the Igbo religion and custom, thus Achebe writes, he grew up at the crossroads of cultures. Chinua Achebe grew up at a time when Africans were not only opposing European rule through political action but also beginning to question with increasing vigor and clarity the cultural assumptions used to justify that rule. Like many other people of his generation, Achebe was given a British education. First at the local mission school, then at the government school, then government college in Umahia, UMUAHIA, UMUAHIA, UMUAHIA. Keep that in mind. And finally at the University College Ibadan, Kaplai BADAN, Kaplai BADAN, where he had planned to study medicine. Both as a creative writer and as a critic, Achebe has had great influence over African literature, both as a creative writer and as a critic. Achebe has had a great influence. His novels have made an especially powerful impression upon young Igbo writers, IBO writers, এগুলো তো মনে রাখতে হবে, who first became acquainted with his works as high school or university students. So his political involvement as well as the intensity of his experience during the Civil War meant that Achebe found the writing of poetry, short stories, essays, and lectures more appropriate and more pierceable than the writing of the novels. The collection of essays from his early, The Role of the Writer in a New Nation. He was born in 1930 and grew up at a very crucial period of the definition of the intellectual and moral character of the modern Igbo man. It was with his generation that the average Igbo boy of scant means was able to have university education and at home too. That generation brought into the life of Igbo intellectual a kind of exhilarating and refreshing humor formed from a combination of past and present. It was this generation that chose or learned to face life with its both innocence and shrewdness, with a jovial but serious attitude which enabled it to face modernity without anger and without equivocation. Sashibe's work also part of the Ibadan, Kaplai BADAN movement of the 1950s and 60s. Achibe's first statement on social responsibility of the African writer was made in the lecture entitled The Role of the Writer in New Nation, delivered to the Nigerian Library Association in 1964. Achebe talks specifically about the role of the writer in what he called the new Nigeria. The major problem all over the world, he said, was the debate between white and black humanity, a subject which presented the African writer with a great challenge. It is inconceivable to me that such a serious writer who could stand aside from this debate or be independent to this argument, which calls this full humanity in question. For me, at any rate, there is a clear duty to make a statement. So, this is my answer to those who say that a writer should be writing about contemporary issues, about politics in 1964, about city life, the lost hoop dietet. Of course, these are the legitimate themes for the writer, but as far as I am concerned, and fundamental themes must first be disposed of. This theme, put quite sharply, quite simply, is that African people did not hear of culture for the first time from the European, that their societies were not middle but frequently had a philosophy of great depth and value and beauty, that they had poetry and above all, they had dignity. So you see, there are many questions that are to be answered in his writings. The writer can tell the people where the rain began to beat them. So, after the entire novelist's duty is not to beat this morning's headline in topicality, it is to explore in depth the human condition. The famous critic Gareth Griffith, Garethgriffiths, formerly a lecturer at the University of Missouri, has published Double Exile, African and Western Indian Writing Between Two Cultures. In that book, he wrote a chapter called Language and Action in the novels of Chinua Achebe. He says for Achebe, the novel is a vehicle of self discovery. Writing is an activity through which the African can define his identity and rediscover his historical roots. This concern with identity is rooted in African writers' problems with language. The very choice of language involves a deliberate public stance. His use of dialect or of phrases in his native language is cultural jest as well as rhetorical devices. Achebe has insisted upon committed stance of the African writer. He has a clear vision of the duty which the writer owes to the society in a post-colonial situation. He refused to believe that African writer could be alienated, separated from his society in spite of the fact that the education of African was largely Western oriented. The relationship between European writers and the audience will not automatically reproduce itself in Africa. In Africa, Achebe said, society expects the writer to be its leader. He revealed that many people have asked him to bring out more forcefully the lessons to be learned from the stories. African writers are committed to a new society which will affirm their validity and accord to identity as Africans, as peoples. So he himself could not abstain, although he would not deny the right of any writer to do so. Achebe is correct that politics and social affairs cannot be kept out of literature in Africa, at least not for some time. Yet the writer's approach to these issues will be crucial to the quality of the work. So, in many of his interviews, he has also protested about the African writing. I believe it is impossible to write anything in Africa without some kind of commitment, some kind of message, some kind of protest. So he did so in his writings. Achebe has moved from criticizing his society to directly taking a hand in remolding it. He claimed that a nation recording the past and inanition, it's called inanition. So the African writers has a great influence in determining African future. So in his writings, we find the African problems very much highlighted through the characters and the situations they are thrown into. And we find him writing about the African idealism, concern for rival, cultural heritage, and have been lost The second Black and African Arts Festival, therefore, seems an occasion to see Black literature in its historical and intercontinental perspective. So many critics have written many details of its writing. So the group of critics, Leon Damas, Ames, Inspire, Leopold Singer, James Baldwin, called that Aceh to come into the world as men finds the political and cultural implication of negritude under attack. Negritude means the concern of the Negroes in attack. So we see that he has brought these attacks on negritude very much on the theory of an ideology and made it clear of the African situation, the African nation we all know today. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to find out what is the center of the novel that he wrote. So actually, Achebe himself says that I have come forward to help you out, to make you know about what the Africa is like. I want to say that the lizard that jumped from the high oak tree to the ground said that he would praise himself if no one else did, because it is Africa. So there are many critics who say that his writing pleases everyone because he makes us known of the African culture, the African nation, the African soil, the African men, the African way of talking, speaking, and advising to people, and also exchanging and asking them to go ahead and prepare your farm. So you see, the proverbs concerning the lizard and the bird emphasize the society's concern with individual achievement and with physical survival, as well as its perception of man as at one with nature, learning from the animal world. So the language you find in Achieve is the new language, which allows the previously unspoken, unheard, and therefore unrecognized. Within few pages, we witness the breakdown of the Igbo language and the triumph of English. So historically, the action of things fall apart, and the arrow of God belongs to the first phase of colonial contact with the Igbo land. Philosophically, the two novels point to the central constant that is part of Igbo life before and since the colonial experience. So, critics, professors of African literature, they think that Chinua Achebe has come up with the Nigerian culture that has been made to the world, and the entire world knows about it. So the literature written about Africa during the time generally tended to reinforce those assumptions of the British and help them defend colonial rule as the Enlightenment to primitive peoples without a valid civilization of their own. Hence, Africa was seen as a dark continent, and even it is seen today. So, this dark continent became known to us because of only one man, if we say, and if we talk of him, and that is Chinua Achebe. If we wouldn't have come up with the reality of the situation of the African system, the African culture, the African way of life, we wouldn't have come to know today about Africa.